My daughter kicked me out because her husband didn't want extra mouths to feed. 3 months later, I bought the building they live in and tripled their rent. But trust me, that was just the beginning of what I had planned. Please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're hearing my story of revenge. I want to know how far it's gone. My name is Helen Parker, and this story isn't something I'm proud of, but it's something I needed to live through to finally understand who I really am. You see, people think revenge is about anger, about hurting someone back. But for me, it started with silence. The kind of silence that wraps around you when the people you love most pretend you don't exist anymore. It started a year after my husband, Mark, passed away. He was the love of my life, my best friend, and the only person who ever made me feel safe. When cancer took him, I lost everything. Not just my partner, but the life we built together. We had one daughter, Lily, and she was my reason to keep breathing. Every decision I made after his death revolved around her. How to make sure she was okay, how to stay close, how not to become a burden. When Mark passed, I sold our family home to cover the medical bills. It was a hard decision, but Lily and Ethan insisted it was for the best. "You shouldn't live alone in that big house," Lily said, her voice soft but distant. "Just move in with us for a while, Mom. We'll take care of you." I believed her. I really did. When I moved into their house, I told myself it would just be temporary. I brought a few boxes, a suitcase, and a framed photo of Mark, the one where he's smiling under the oak tree we planted on our wedding day. I remember setting it on the nightstand and whispering, "I'll be okay, Mark," she promised. But the promise didn't last long. From the very first week, I could feel Ethan's eyes on me, cold, sharp, and filled with irritation. He didn't like the sound of my slippers on the floor or how I rearranged the coffee mugs. He made jokes about old people habits, laughed when I forgot where I'd left my reading glasses, and sighed loudly whenever I cooked something that wasn't to his taste. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just an adjustment period, that living together would get easier. But it didn't. It only got worse. One evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. The walls in that house carried every whisper, and I wasn't even trying to listen. I was just passing by when I heard Ethan say, "I can't keep doing this. We're barely managing bills as it is, and now we're feeding an extra mouth." There was a pause. I waited, praying she'd defend me, that she'd say, "She's my mother, Ethan. Show some respect." But all I heard was her tired sigh. "I know," she said quietly. "I'll talk to her." That night, I cried quietly in my room. I hadn't felt that kind of pain since the day Mark died. The feeling that you're too much, too heavy, too inconvenient, it eats away at you. I started cleaning more, cooking less, trying to stay out of their way. I'd go for long walks just to give them space. But nothing I did ever seemed enough. Ethan started making it obvious. He'd roll his eyes when I spoke, complain about the groceries I bought, or mutter things like, "Must be nice, not paying rent." And Lily, she stopped looking at me the same way. The girl who once ran into my arms after school now avoided eye contact, as if loving me had become embarrassing. One evening, we were having dinner, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and awkward silence. Ethan cleared his throat, his fork clinking against the plate. He said, "Helen, we need to talk about living arrangements." Lily didn't look up. She just kept cutting her chicken into smaller and smaller pieces. I knew what was coming before he even said it. He continued, "We can't keep doing this. We're struggling, And it's not fair to expect us to support, well, anyone right now. Maybe it's time you found your own place." I stared at him, then at Lily. She didn't say a word. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "My own place?" I whispered. "Lily, is that what you want?" Her eyes glistened, but she stayed silent. That silence hurt more than any words could ever. I nodded slowly, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Of course, I understand." That night, I packed what little I had, 2 suitcases, a few photographs, and Mark's old wristwatch. As I zipped the last bag, I heard the rain start to fall outside. It felt fitting somehow. I left the house without saying goodbye. I found a cheap motel near the edge of town, the kind with flickering lights and paper-thin walls. It smelled like damp carpet and cigarette smoke, but it was all I could afford. I remember sitting on that creaky bed, staring at the ceiling, asking myself over and over, what did I do wrong? How did I become unwanted in my own child's life? Days turned into weeks. The silence was heavy, unbearable at times. I tried to call Lily a few times, but she never answered. I sent her a message on her birthday, just a simple, "I love you." It showed as read, but there was no reply. One afternoon, while I was cleaning out my suitcase, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A small, leather-bound diary that had belonged to my late mother. I opened it, expecting old recipes or faded notes, but inside was something else. A name I didn't recognize, written again and again in her handwriting. Edward Langford. There was a note tucked between the pages, yellowed and fragile. It said, "For Helen when she's ready to know who she really is." At first, I thought it was nonsense, but curiosity got the better of me. The next morning, I called the number of a lawyer mentioned in one of the diary entries, Daniel Cross. I didn't expect him to answer, but when he did, everything changed. He told me he'd been trying to reach me for months, that Edward Langford, a man I'd never met, had passed away and left something behind, an inheritance, for me. I didn't understand. I told him there must be a mistake, that I didn't know anyone by that name. But Daniel explained that Edward had been a close friend of my mother, and that his will specifically named me as a beneficiary. When I received the first document from his office, I sat there in disbelief. It wasn't just money, it was power. Enough to change my life. Enough to make choices again. Enough to turn pain into something sharper, something controlled. That night, for the first time in months, I didn't cry. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat by the motel window, and whispered to the dark, "Mark, I think I finally know what to do." Because I wasn't going to just survive anymore. I was going to take back everything they thought I'd lost. My dignity, my peace, my power. And I was going to start with the one thing they valued most. Their home. I took a deep breath that night, staring at the city lights beyond the motel window. For weeks, I'd been broken, a shell of the woman I once was. But now, I felt something new rising inside me, something sharp and deliberate. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. Over the next few days, I met with Daniel Cross, the estate lawyer. He was kind, patient, and professional. The first person in months who spoke to me like I mattered. His office smelled like old books and polished wood, and when he slid the papers across his desk, I almost couldn't believe what I was looking at. "Mrs. Parker," he said, adjusting his glasses, "Edward Langford's estate was substantial. He left you the equivalent of just over $2 million, along with certain shares in his company. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of." I blinked. 2 million? The number didn't even sound real. Daniel smiled gently. You'll need to sign here and here. Once processed, the funds will be transferred into your name within a few weeks. I signed the papers with trembling hands. It felt like I was signing a second chance at life. But it wasn't about the money. It was about what that money could mean. On the bus ride back to the motel, I kept thinking about Lily and Ethan, about the way he looked at me like I was an intruder, and the way she stood by and let him. I had tried to forgive, to understand, to be the mother who keeps loving no matter what. But forgiveness had done nothing but leave me cold and hungry in a motel room. That's when the idea came to me. Not all at once, but in small, deliberate pieces. Revenge doesn't need to be loud or cruel. It just needs to be smart. I spent the next few weeks learning, reading everything I could about property, ownership, and investments. I met with Daniel again, pretending to be just another client curious about real estate. When I mentioned the neighborhood where Lily and Ethan lived, Daniel nodded thoughtfully. He said, "That area's good for long-term rentals. There's a building on Oak Ridge Avenue that might be available soon, but it's old, needs work." Oak Ridge Avenue. That was their street. My heart started racing. Could you check if it's the one with a brick exterior and a blue front door? He raised an eyebrow. Yes, actually. You know it? I smiled faintly. You could say that. The building was owned by a small investment group that was eager to sell. Through Daniel's help, I formed an LLC, Harbor Light Properties, so my name wouldn't appear on the documents. If Lily or Ethan ever looked it up, they'd see only a business entity, not the mother they'd thrown away. I remember the day I signed the purchase papers. My hands were steady, my voice calm. The seller had no idea that this wasn't just a business transaction, it was personal justice. The next week, I stood across the street, watching the building as snow began to fall. The same building where my daughter and her husband lived. The windows were lit from the inside, warm and cozy. I wondered if Lily ever thought about me when she made dinner, or Ethan still made jokes about extra mouths to feed. Now they were feeding me in a way they'd never imagine. When the sale finalized, I became their landlord. Quietly. Invisibly. The first month, I changed nothing. I wanted them to settle into the illusion of stability. Then I sent a letter to all tenants announcing a standard rent review due to updated property assessments. It was all legal, all justified. I didn't target them specifically, but the new rates applied to everyone, including apartment 3B. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with an email from Ethan. He'd written to the property management contact listed for Harbor Light Properties. Good afternoon. We just received notice about the rent increase. This seems excessive considering the condition of the building. We'd appreciate reconsideration. I could almost hear his condescending tone in those words. I smiled, typing a short reply through the company account. Dear Mr. Hayes, we appreciate your concern. The increase aligns with current market standards. All tenants are subject to the same terms. Sincerely, Harbor Light Management. For the first time in months, I laughed. A quiet, disbelieving laugh that shook the air around me. I imagined him pacing the living room, angry and helpless, while Lily tried to calm him down. Weeks passed. The increase hit hard. They tried negotiating again, but I kept the tone professional, detached. They had no idea who was behind the emails, the letters, the new policies. But I didn't stop there. I began renovating the empty units, repainting, updating appliances, increasing the overall property value. With every improvement, the rent rose again, legally, fairly, and steadily. I was in control now, not just financially, but emotionally. For years, I had defined myself by how much I gave to my husband, to my daughter, to everyone who needed me. But for the first time, I was the one holding the power. One evening, I stopped by the building under the pretense of inspecting the renovations. I wore a dark coat, sunglasses, and a quiet smile. As I walked through the hall, I heard Lily's laughter echo faintly through a half-open window. It stopped me in my tracks. She sounded happy, genuinely happy. And for a brief moment, I felt that familiar ache, the love that still refused to die, no matter how deeply it had been buried. I wanted to knock on the door, to tell her everything, to ask why, but I didn't. Instead, I whispered to myself, not yet. Because revenge isn't just about getting even, it's about timing. A month later, I got word from the management company that Ethan had been laid off. The rent hikes were becoming unbearable, and the building's costs weren't slowing down. They started missing payments. Late fees piled up. Lily sent a desperate email, polite but pleading, asking if there was any flexibility. I didn't respond right away. I let her wait, just like she made me wait outside her house that night with my suitcase in the rain. When I finally replied, it was simple. Dear Mrs. Hayes, we understand your circumstances, but must maintain consistency for all tenants. Payment extensions are not available at this time. Sincerely, Harbor Light Management. The next day, I drove by their building again. Their lights were off. For the first time in years, the power dynamic had shifted completely, and they didn't even know who held the strings. That night, sitting in my quiet apartment, I realized I wasn't doing this for money or even payback anymore. I was teaching them something. A lesson in empathy, in humility, in remembering that kindness is never guaranteed to come back once you throw it away. Still, a part of me wanted her to know, not yet, but soon. Because every storm ends the same way, with the truth finally breaking through. And when Lily learned who her landlord really was, I wanted to be there to watch her face when she realized what extra mouths to feed had cost her. When I got back to the motel that night, I stared at the ceiling for hours. The same flickering light above my bed cast those familiar shadows, and the smell of cheap disinfectant lingered in the air. I was supposed to feel victorious. I had a solid plan, a legal edge, and a dream about to come true. But instead, I felt empty. Maybe because deep down, I still hoped my daughter would realize what she'd done. Maybe because no revenge could ever erase the memory of the night she shut the door on me. 3 weeks later, Daniel Cross called me into his office. His face was unreadable, calm, professional, but there was something in his eyes. Helen, he said, the sale went through. The Langford estate was finalized, and the transfer is complete. I blinked. Wait, you mean... He nodded. The building on Sycamore Street is yours, entirely. For a second, I couldn't even breathe. That was their address. The building where Lily and Ethan lived, the same one they had kicked me out of 3 months earlier. Daniel slid the papers toward me, his tone neutral. Do with it as you see fit. The moment I signed, something inside me shifted. It wasn't joy, not really. It was power. Cold, quiet power that hummed in my chest like static. The next morning, I visited the property. The same building I had been forced to walk away from now loomed before me. Mine, in every legal sense. The walls were faded beige, the same color I'd once helped Lily paint when she and Ethan first moved in. I remember how proud she was back then, standing on that porch with a paintbrush in her hand saying, "Mom, this is our fresh start." Now I stood in front of that same door, holding the master key. I went inside. The hallways smelled of old wood and coffee. My footsteps echoed through the corridor. For a moment, I caught sight of Lily's shadow through the frosted glass of her apartment door. She was humming softly, probably cooking breakfast. I froze. Every muscle in my body wanted to run. I hadn't seen her in months, but I turned away. Not yet. I climbed up to the rooftop instead, the same place I used to dry laundry when I lived there. I stood there and looked down at the city, breathing in the morning air. It felt unreal. I owned it all now. Later that day, I called the building management company and told them I wanted to handle all tenants personally. I'll be setting new lease agreements, and I want the rent increased, significantly. When I hung up, my heart was racing. It felt almost wicked, but justified. Every cruel word Ethan had thrown at me, useless, burden, extra mouth to feed, echoed back now with interest. The notices went out a week later. Triple rent. No exceptions. I could only imagine the look on their faces when they saw the letter. 2 days passed before I got the call. My phone rang early in the morning. An unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello? Is this Mrs. Parker? The voice on the other end was shaky, uncertain. Yes? Who's calling? This is Lily Hayes. I just got a notice about the rent increase. There must be some mistake. My breath caught, but I kept my voice even. No mistake, I said. It's official. The new landlord set new rates. She hesitated. Can I speak to them, please? We can't afford that. For a long second, I didn't answer. Then I said softly, You already are. Silence. I could hear her breathing, fast, shallow. Then a whisper. Mom? I closed my eyes. Yes, Lily. Her words tumbled out, desperate. Mom, please, we didn't mean what happened. Ethan was just stressed. Things got hard after you left. Please, can you lower it? We have a baby now. We're already behind on bills. A baby. That hit me like a punch. I didn't even know she was pregnant. I should have been there. But the image of that night, me standing in the rain, suitcase in hand, while Ethan closed the door, came back like fire. My tone hardened. You made your choice, Lily. You wanted me gone. Now you get to live with it. She started crying. Mom, please. I hung up. For the rest of the day, I sat in silence. I didn't eat, didn't move, just stared at the window, feeling the weight of my own actions. The revenge that once felt righteous now tasted bitter. But I told myself she needed to learn. Ethan needed to learn. That night, Ethan called. His voice was calm, too calm. Helen, you think this is funny? You think you can just waltz back into our lives and ruin us? Funny? No. Fair. You're insane. We'll move out. You won't see a cent. That's your choice, I said quietly. But wherever you go, remember, you threw away family for convenience. I hung up again, but something in his tone, that quiet, angry confidence, told me this wasn't over. Ethan wasn't going to accept defeat easily. And I was right, because 2 weeks later, I found a letter taped to my office door. No signature, just one line, written in shaky handwriting. You think you've won, but you don't know the whole story. I didn't know it then, but that note would change everything and reveal a secret that would make me question who I was truly getting revenge on. The note stayed on my desk all night. I must have read that single sentence 100 times. You think you've won, but you don't know the whole story. At first, I thought it was Ethan, one of his pathetic attempts to scare me. But the handwriting was off, smaller, neater. There was something almost familiar about it. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept circling back to Lily's voice on the phone, the way she said, "We have a baby now," the way she cried. I told myself I didn't care, that they deserved whatever pain came their way. But my heart, my mother's heart, wouldn't shut up. By morning, I decided to find out what the whole story really was. I called Daniel Cross and asked him if he knew anything about the building's previous ownership, specifically about Edward Langford, the man whose estate I'd inherited. Daniel hesitated. "Helen, there's something I wasn't supposed to tell you. Edward Langford had specific instructions in his will. You weren't the only person he mentioned." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "There's a clause," he said slowly. "He left a small trust fund to a woman named Lily Hayes. It wasn't much, but enough to help her if she ever fell on hard times. I thought it was a coincidence. Until now." I froze. "Are you saying my daughter was connected to Edward Langford too?" "That's what it looks like." My pulse started racing. It didn't make sense. How could a man I barely knew, an old friend of my late husband, leave money for my daughter? Unless Edward wasn't just a family friend. That afternoon, I drove straight to Lily's building. My building. I stood outside her door, my hand hovering over the frame. For a full minute, I just listened. Inside, I heard faint laughter, a baby's giggle. Then a man's voice, low and tired. "Ethan." I knocked. The laughter stopped. A moment later, Lily opened the door. Her eyes went wide. She looked thinner, exhausted, but her expression wasn't angry. It was broken. "Mom?" she whispered. For the first time in months, she didn't look at me like a stranger. I didn't say anything. I just held up the note. "Who wrote this?" Her lip trembled. "I did." The words hit harder than I expected. "Why?" "Because you don't know everything. Please, come inside." I hesitated, but I stepped in. The apartment looked smaller than I remembered. Boxes stacked in corners, the faint smell of baby powder in the air. A crib stood by the window, and inside was a tiny bundle with bright blue eyes. My granddaughter. Lily picked her up gently. "This is Emma," she said, her voice shaking. "Your granddaughter." I felt my chest tighten. "She's beautiful," I whispered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence hung heavy, filled with everything we hadn't said in months. Then Lily looked up at me, tears forming. "Mom, Ethan didn't want to kick you out. I did." I blinked. "What?" She nodded slowly. "He begged me not to, but I was scared. I thought if you stayed, we'd never be able to build our own life. I blamed you for everything, for Dad's death, for the debt, for the stress. I told Ethan to tell you it was his decision, so you'd hate him instead of me." Her words hit like ice water. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she whispered. "But after you left, everything fell apart. Ethan lost his job. The bills piled up. Then I found out I was pregnant. I wanted to call you so many times, but I was too ashamed." I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. For months, I'd carried this anger, this burning sense of betrayal, and now it turned out the person I hated most was the one trying to protect me from the truth. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was a coward." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "And the letter from Langford? The trust fund?" She nodded. "Dad used to work for him. After Dad died, Mr. Langford reached out. He said he'd set something aside for me, for when life got hard. I didn't think much of it until the lawyer called last month. I thought it was some kind of sick joke. Then I saw your name on the paperwork." The room was spinning. My husband had worked for Langford? Why didn't I know? "Mom," said Lily softly, "Daniel Cross came to me too. He said Mr. Langford didn't just leave us money, he left us a message." She handed me an envelope yellowed with age. My name was written across the front in careful handwriting. For Helen Parker. I tore it open with trembling hands. Inside was a single letter. Helen, if you're reading this, it means I've finally done what I promised your late husband I would. He came to me before he passed. He knew the struggles you'd face. He made me vow to protect you and Lily in my will. What neither of you ever knew is that he left me part of his savings to safeguard your future. That money became the foundation of this inheritance. Take it, both of you. Use it to rebuild what was lost. And please forgive each other. He loved you both more than you'll ever know. Edward Langford. By the time I finished reading, tears blurred the ink. Lily was crying too. All this time, all the pain, the anger, the betrayal, it all came from misunderstandings and secrets buried by pride. I sat down on the couch and covered my face. Oh, Lily, what have we done to each other? She knelt beside me, her hand trembling as she reached for mine. Can we start over? I didn't answer right away, but as I looked at Emma, tiny, innocent, untouched by all this bitterness, I knew the answer. Yes, I said finally. We can start over. But deep down, I also knew someone wasn't ready to let go. Because standing in the doorway, half hidden in shadow, was Ethan. His eyes weren't soft like Lily's. They were cold, calculating, and filled with something I'd seen before. Resentment. And in that moment, I realized my revenge story wasn't over yet. Ethan's stare lingered long after the door closed. I could still feel it burning through the wood as I sat there, holding my granddaughter. That look wasn't confusion or fear, it was resentment. The kind that festers when a man feels cornered, powerless, and humiliated. I'd seen that look before. In men who thought control was their birthright. Ethan had lost everything he thought he owned, his pride, his home, his status, and to make it worse, I was the reason. For the next few weeks, things felt deceptively calm. Lily and I met for tea twice a week. We laughed about small things, shared stories about Emma's first words, her first steps. There were still cracks between us, but for the first time in years, I could see the daughter I used to know. The one who would braid my hair before school, who used to climb into my lap when storms frightened her. But beneath that peace, something dark was brewing. One night, just as I was about to sleep, my phone rang. It was Daniel Cross. His voice was tight. Helen, we have a problem. What kind of problem? It's Ethan Hayes. He's been filing claims against your LLC, accusing you of fraud, coercion, even elder abuse. He's trying to sue you for ownership rights of the building. I froze. What? He's alleging that you manipulated him and his wife for profit. None of it holds water legally, but if he goes public, it could get messy. Messy. That was an understatement. The next morning, I went to see Lily. She looked shocked when I told her. Mom, he didn't tell me any of that. I swear I had no idea. Do you believe me? I asked quietly. Her eyes filled with tears. Of course I do. I know who you are now. That was the first time I'd heard her say, I know who you are. We decided not to confront Ethan directly. Daniel filed a countersuit to shut down the accusations. But Ethan didn't stop. He started leaving threats. Voicemails, emails, even a note slipped under my door that read, You took everything from me. I'm going to take it back. The fear came back. The same fear I'd felt when I was kicked out months ago. But this time, it didn't break me. It fueled me. I began documenting everything. Every call, every text, every word. Daniel advised me to install cameras around my apartment and the building's common areas. I did. It was only a matter of time. And, sure enough, one night, around 2 a.m., the cameras caught him, Ethan, breaking into the building's basement with a crowbar and a gas can. He wasn't just trying to scare me, he was trying to destroy everything. I didn't hesitate. I called the police. When they arrived, Ethan was already pouring gasoline across the floor. muttering to himself. The footage was clear, undeniable. He was arrested on the spot. Lily arrived just in time to see the flashing lights and the officers leading her husband away. She collapsed in tears on the sidewalk. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't know he'd gone this far." I knelt beside her. For once, I didn't feel anger or triumph, just grief. Grief for the family that had crumbled, for the love that had rotted under the weight of pride and resentment. Ethan was sentenced to 3 years in prison for arson, attempt, and harassment. When the trial ended, Lily stood by me every day, holding Emma on her hip. She was pale and quiet, but strong. The girl who once pushed me away was now the woman who faced her worst nightmare with her head high. Months passed. The building, my building, felt emptier, quieter. I decided to sell it, just as Daniel had suggested. The profit was enormous, more than enough to start over. But money didn't matter anymore. Half of it went to a women's shelter, the same kind that took me in when I had nowhere else to go after Lily and Ethan threw me out. I donated it anonymously. The other half I used to buy a small home by the lake. Nothing fancy, but peaceful. A place for healing. Lily and Emma visit every weekend. Sometimes we cook together. Sometimes we just sit on the porch, watching the sun fade into the water. There's still a scar between us, but it's no longer bleeding. A few weeks after moving in, I found something in one of the boxes Daniel had packed from the old office. The original deed to the apartment building. On the back, written in Edward Langford's handwriting, were the words, "Real power isn't in revenge, Helen. It's in rebuilding after the ashes settle." I read it over and over until I finally understood. My story wasn't just about payback. It was about finding my voice again after years of silence, about learning that revenge can spark change, but only forgiveness can set you free. Now, whenever I look at Emma's tiny hands grasping mine, I know why I went through it all, so she'd never have to. Because the truth is, revenge got me justice, but forgiveness gave me peace. If you've listened this far, thank you. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? Would you have taken revenge like I did, or walked away sooner? And don't forget to like and subscribe, not for me, but for every woman who's ever been told she was too small to fight back. Because sometimes quiet justice is the loudest sound of all. Helen Parker.